In 1953, the average British family owned 2 pairs of shoes each. 2. And those shoes lasted years, not months, because your grandmother knew tricks that modern manufacturers desperately hope you have forgotten. Number 14 on this list uses something you already have under your kitchen sink, and it outperforms every branded leather conditioner on the market. Number 7 was standard practice in every cobbler's shop until the 1980s, and it doubles the life of any sole. These 25 tricks kept wardrobes and parlours going through rationing, through austerity, through decades when buying new was simply not an option. The furniture polish industry alone is worth £800 million a year in the UK. That industry depends on you not knowing what your grandmother knew. A tin of beeswax and 10 minutes does what their entire product range cannot. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because this list might save you hundreds of pounds this year. Let us count down the 25 smartest tricks for making shoes, coats and furniture last a lifetime. Number 25. Newspaper shoe trees. Before cedar shoe trees cost 20 quid a pair at John Lewis, your dad kept every pair of shoes in shape with yesterday's Daily Mirror. He would ball up sheets of newspaper, stuff them firmly into each shoe after wearing, and leave them overnight. The paper absorbed moisture from a full day of walking, pulling dampness out of the leather lining before it could rot the stitching. Sweat left sitting in a shoe overnight broke down the insole and weakened the upper where it met the sole. Newspaper wicked it all away for free. Read it at breakfast, stuff your shoes with it at night. The ink never transferred if the shoes were dry inside, and the paper held the toe box in perfect shape so the leather did not crease and crack. Your dad had 6 pairs of shoes that lasted a decade each. We buy trainers that collapse in 6 months and wonder why. Number 24. The doorstep hearthstone. Every front step in a terraced street was scrubbed weekly with a block of hearthstone, that chalky cream-coloured brick your grandmother kept by the back door. She would wet the stone, rub it across the step in wide arcs, and let it dry to a clean matte finish. But here is what most people never realised. She used that same hearthstone on the wooden windowsills, the slate mantelpiece, and even the quarry tiles in the scullery. The calcium compound in the stone filled microscopic scratches and sealed porous surfaces against moisture. It cost about 3p a block and lasted months. The weekly ritual kept stone and tile from crumbling, prevented moss from taking hold, and gave every surface a protective layer that modern sealants try to replicate at 50 times the price. When chemical sprays took over in the 1970s, the hearthstone vanished, but it had kept British homes presentable through 2 world wars. Number 23. Saddle soap for everything leather. That round tin of saddle soap was not just for horse tack. Your grandfather used it on shoes, belts, handbags, suitcases, and the leather armchair in the front room. He would dampen a cloth, work up a lather on the soap, and rub it into the leather in small circles. The lanolin in saddle soap cleaned dirt out of the grain while depositing a thin layer of natural oil that kept leather supple. Dry leather cracks, cracked leather splits. Split leather gets thrown away. Saddle soap prevented the whole cycle for about 1 shilling a tin. He would treat his shoes every Sunday evening after church, sitting in the kitchen with newspaper spread on the table. The whole process took 10 minutes. Those shoes went to work Monday morning looking like they had just come from the cobbler's. Modern leather creams cost £8 a tube, and half of them contain silicone that actually suffocates the leather over time. Your grandfather's saddle soap let the leather breathe. That is why his briefcase lasted 30 years and yours lasts 3. Number 22. Vinegar rinse for woolens. When your grandmother washed her winter coat, she added a cupful of white vinegar to the final rinse water, not the malt vinegar from the chip shop. Plain white distilled vinegar at about 4p a bottle. The acid in the vinegar dissolved soap residue that made wool feel stiff and scratchy after washing. It also relaxed the fibres, keeping the coat soft and preventing that matted, felted look that ruined good wool. The vinegar smell vanished completely as the coat dried on the line. What remained was wool that felt like new, with the nap sitting smooth and the weave holding its shape. She never put woolens in the wringer either. She would press the water out gently between towels. That combination of vinegar rinse and careful drying meant her good winter coat lasted 15 years without pilling or shrinking. We throw wool in the machine on a quick cycle and wonder why it comes out fit for the dog's bed. Number 21. Beeswax and turpentine furniture polish. Forget Mr. Sheen. Your grandmother made furniture polish that actually protected wood instead of just making it shiny for an afternoon. She would grate pure beeswax into a jam jar, pour in enough turpentine to cover it, and leave it on the windowsill until the wax dissolved into a thick paste. That paste went onto every wooden surface in the house. She would apply a thin layer with a soft cloth, let it dry for 20 minutes, then buff it to a deep warm glow with an old flannel. The beeswax filled the grain of the wood and sealed it against moisture. The turpentine carried the wax deep into the surface and then evaporated, leaving pure protection behind. A jar lasted 6 months and cost almost nothing to make. That mahogany dining table your great-grandmother owned still looks magnificent because someone fed it beeswax every fortnight for 50 years. Spray polishes contain silicone that sits on top of the wood, attracting dust and slowly building a cloudy film that damages the finish underneath. Number 20. The cobbler's welt stitch repair. When the sole started pulling away from the upper on a good pair of shoes, your dad did not throw them out. He took them to the cobbler on the high street, who would re-stitch the welt by hand using waxed linen thread and a curved awl. That welt stitch, the seam that joins the upper leather to the sole, was the most important structural element of any shoe. A proper re-welting cost about 5 shillings in the 1960s and added another 5 years to the shoe. The waxed thread resisted moisture and the hand tension was stronger than any machine stitch. There were over 25,000 cobblers in Britain in 1950. By 2020, fewer than 3,000 remained. We lost an entire trade because manufacturers started gluing soles instead of stitching them, making shoes impossible to repair by design. Number 19. Linseed oil for cricket bats and wooden handles. Every tool in the garden shed, every wooden kitchen utensil, every cricket bat in the cupboard got a coat of raw linseed oil at least once a year. Your grandfather would pour a little oil onto a rag, rub it into the bare wood, and leave it to soak in overnight. Linseed oil penetrated deep into the grain, preventing splits and keeping the wood flexible under stress. A cricket bat treated with linseed oil absorbed the shock of the ball without cracking. A wooden spade handle stayed smooth and splinter-free for decades. A bottle cost about 1 shilling and lasted years. The trick was using raw linseed, not boiled, for items that touched food because boiled linseed contained metallic drying agents. Your grandfather knew the difference. 5 minutes of effort in autumn prevented £20 of replacement costs in spring. Number 18. Bread for cleaning wallpaper. When the parlour wallpaper started looking grubby, your grandmother did not redecorate. She took a thick slice of white bread, cut the crusts off, and rubbed it across the wall in gentle downward strokes. The soft bread acted like a natural eraser, lifting soot, dust, and finger marks from the paper without dampening or tearing it. In the days of coal fires, every wall collected a film of soot within months. Bread cleaned it perfectly. The gluten was slightly sticky, enough to grab particles without leaving residue. A whole loaf could clean an entire room at about 9 pence. Commercial wallpaper cleaners arrived in the 1960s, chemical sponges that smelled of ammonia and sometimes stained the pattern. Your grandmother's bread did the job better. Number 17. Potato water for cleaning silver. After boiling potatoes for Sunday lunch, your grandmother never threw the water down the drain. She would let it cool, then soak the good silver cutlery and the tea service in it for 30 minutes. The starch released by the potatoes during cooking acted as a gentle cleaning agent, loosening tarnish from silver without scratching the surface. She would lift each piece out, give it a light rub with a soft cloth, and the silver came up gleaming. No chemical polish, no harsh abrasives wearing away the plate. Just potato water that was heading for the drain anyway. A set of silver-plated cutlery could last generations if the surface was never scratched by aggressive polishing. Your grandmother understood this. She treated her wedding silver with the same care she treated everything else. Gently, wisely, and with whatever was already to hand. First, pattern break. Here is something the furniture industry does not want you to know. That scratch on your dining table, the one you think means the whole thing needs replacing, can be fixed with a walnut, Not walnut oil, an actual walnut. Your grandmother would crack one open, rub the raw nut meat directly along the scratch, and watch the natural oils darken the exposed wood, blending it back into the surrounding finish. The oils in the walnut matched the tones of most hardwoods almost perfectly. Oak, mahogany, teak, walnut itself. 10 seconds of rubbing and the scratch virtually disappeared. She would then buff the area with a soft cloth and apply a thin coat of her beeswax polish over the top to seal it. That scratch would stay invisible for years. Furniture repair companies charge £50 for this. Your grandmother did it for the price of a walnut from the greengrocer. We have been convinced that scratched furniture is ruined furniture. It is not. It just needs someone who remembers the old tricks. Number 15. Dubbin for work boots. Every working man in Britain knew dubbin, that thick waxy paste in the round tin that smelled of tallow and beeswax. Your dad would warm the tin by the fire until the dubbin softened, then work it into his work boots with his fingers, pushing the wax into every seam and across the whole surface. Dubbin waterproofed leather completely. Rain, puddles, mud, none of it got through. The wax also kept the leather soft and prevented cracking in cold weather. A tin cost about 1 6 in the 1960s and lasted most of the year. His work boots survived building sites, factory floors, and allotment mud for years because he spent 10 minutes every Sunday evening feeding them dubbin. Modern waterproof sprays cost £8 a can, last about 2 weeks, and leave a chemical residue that dries the leather out underneath. Dubbin actually nourished the leather while protecting it. That is the difference between a trick that works and a product designed to make you buy more. Number 14. Washing up liquid and bicarbonate of soda for suede. When your mum's suede shoes got stained, she mixed a drop of fairy liquid with a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda and a splash of warm water. She would dip an old toothbrush into the paste and gently scrub the stain in one direction, following the nap of the suede. Then she would blot it with a clean cloth and let it dry naturally. Once dry, she would brush the nap back up with a clean dry toothbrush. The bicarbonate lifted the stain while the tiny amount of detergent cut through grease. Total cost, virtually nothing. The branded suede cleaners that appeared in the 1980s were mostly the same ingredients in a fancy bottle at 20 times the price. Your mum cleaned suede court shoes, suede jackets, and even suede handbags with this method for years. The shoes looked immaculate every time she wore them to church. Number 13. Candle wax for sticky drawers and zips. When a wooden drawer stuck, your grandmother rubbed a candle stub along the runners. When a zip jammed on a coat or a dress, she rubbed that same candle along the teeth. The paraffin wax created a slippery barrier that made everything glide smoothly without staining fabric or damaging wood. She kept a box of candle stubs in the kitchen drawer specifically for this purpose. Nothing was thrown away. A stuck drawer was not a furniture problem. It was a 30-second fix. A jammed zip was not the end of a coat. It was a quick rub of wax and carry on. Modern lubricant sprays cost £5 and leave oily marks on fabric. A candle stub cost nothing and solved the problem permanently until the wax eventually wore away, at which point you simply rubbed it again. Number 12. The turned collar. When the collar of your dad's good shirt started fraying at the edges, your mum did not buy him a new shirt. She carefully unpicked the collar, turned it over so the worn side faced down against his neck and the fresh underside faced up, then re-stitched it in place. The shirt got another 2 years of wear from one evening of needlework. A good cotton shirt cost about 15 shillings in the 1950s. Turning the collar doubled its life for the price of thread. Every woman learned this in school during needlework class. It was considered a basic household skill, as fundamental as cooking or cleaning. The sewing box came out on a Tuesday evening, the wireless went on, and by bedtime, every shirt in the house had been inspected, mended, or improved. We treat a frayed collar as a death sentence for the whole garment. Your mom treated it as a 10-minute job. Number 11. Brown paper and vinegar for bruised furniture. When a dent appeared in a wooden table or chair from someone dropping something heavy, your grandmother would soak a piece of brown paper in white vinegar, lay it over the dent, and press a warm iron on top. The steam and acid combination swelled the compressed wood fibers back to their original position. The dent would rise slowly, sometimes disappearing completely. This worked because wood has a cellular memory. Compressed fibers want to return to their original shape. They just need moisture and heat to do it. Your grandmother did not know the science, she just knew it worked. A furniture restorer would charge £30 for this today. Your grandmother did it with a paper bag from the grocer's and a splash of vinegar. The iron went back on the shelf. The table looked perfect. Nobody mentioned it again. Second pattern. Break. Now here is where things get clever. The leather industry has spent decades convincing us that leather care requires specialized products, expensive conditioners, proprietary cleaners, restoration creams at £15 a pot. But your grandfather maintained every leather item in the house with exactly 2 products: saddle soap for cleaning and Neat's foot oil for conditioning. Neat's foot oil, rendered from the shin bones of cattle, was the gold standard for leather preservation. It penetrated deeper than any modern cream, kept leather supple in freezing weather, and cost about 2 shillings a bottle that lasted a year. He would apply a thin coat to shoes, belts, his wallet, and the leather patches on his tweed jacket elbows. The oil never turned rancid, never stained, and never built up a sticky residue. The leather stayed alive. That is the word he would have used, alive. Because well-oiled leather moves and breathes and ages beautifully. Neglected leather dries and dies. 2 products, 2 shillings. Every leather item lasted decades. Number 9. Lavender bags in wardrobes. Your grandmother sewed small muslin pouches, filled them with dried lavender from the garden, and hung them from every clothes rail in the house. The lavender served 2 purposes. It kept moths away from wool coats and suits, and it kept stored clothes smelling fresh without chemical fresheners. Moth damage destroyed more woolen garments than wear ever did. A single moth larvae could eat through a cashmere jumper in a week. Lavender's natural oils repelled them completely. She would replace the bags every autumn when the new lavender had dried, crushing the buds slightly to release the oils. Cedar balls replaced lavender in the 1970s, and chemical moth repellents replaced those. But lavender worked better, smelled better, and cost nothing if you grew your own. Your grandmother's winter coat survived 30 years without a single moth hole because of a muslin bag that took 5 minutes to make. Number 8. Ironing damp cotton and linen. Your mum never ironed bone-dry shirts. She would sprinkle them with water from a glass bottle with a perforated cork stopper, roll them up tight, and leave them for 30 minutes to absorb the moisture evenly. Then, she would iron them with a hot iron on a padded board. The damp heat relaxed the cotton fibers completely, pressing out every crease and leaving a smooth finish that stayed crisp all day. Ironing dry fabric just pushes creases around. Ironing damp fabric actually resets the fiber structure. Her shirts looked professionally laundered. The collar sat flat. The cuffs were razor sharp. Modern steam irons attempt to replicate this, but they apply moisture unevenly. Your mum's method was better. That is why your dad looked smart on a foreman's wage. Number 7. Risoling with leather instead of rubber. When your dad took shoes to the cobbler, he always asked for leather soles, never rubber. Leather soles could be risoled again and again. Each time the cobbler shaved them flat, stitched a new sole, and returned them good as new. A pair of leather-soled shoes could be risoled 5 or 6 times over 20 years. Rubber soles were glued on and could not be replaced once they wore through. The shoe was finished. Leather soles also breathed, reducing moisture buildup that rotted stitching from the inside. Yes, leather was slippier on wet pavements, but your dad preferred shoes that lasted 2 decades to shoes that gripped for 2 years. A risoling cost about 7 shillings. A new pair of shoes cost £3. The mathematics of thrift were simple, and your dad could do them in his head while the cobbler hammered the tacks. Number 6. Patching from the inside. When a hole wore through the elbow of a jumper or the knee of trousers, your mum patched it from the inside, not the outside. She would cut a patch of matching fabric slightly larger than the hole, place it behind the damaged area, and stitch it down from the front using tiny invisible stitches that followed the weave. From the outside, the repair was nearly invisible. External patches screamed poverty. Internal patches showed skill. Your mum took enormous pride in repairs that nobody could detect. That level of care meant clothes stayed respectable through years of hard wear. We throw away jumpers with a single hole now because nobody taught us how to mend from the inside. Number 5. Bread and milk paste for cleaning oil paintings. When the family portrait above the mantelpiece grew dark with decades of coal smoke, your grandmother cleaned it with a paste of white bread crumbled into milk. She would dab the paste gently across the surface, working in small sections, then wipe it away with a soft, damp cloth. The bread and milk lifted surface grime without disturbing the paint beneath. Art restorers at the National Gallery used similar gentle methods well into the 20th century. Chemical cleaners could strip varnish and damage pigments. Bread and milk could not. The painting emerged brighter and sharper, as if someone had opened a curtain. Total cost: a slice of bread and a splash of milk. Number 4. French polishing with a rubber. The highest skill in furniture care was French polishing, and your grandfather could do it at the kitchen table. He would make a rubber, a pad of cotton wool wrapped tightly in a square of linen, and soak it with shellac dissolved in methylated spirits. Then he would glide the rubber across the furniture surface in figure of 8 motions, building up thin layers of shellac that dried to a mirror-like finish. 20 passes created a surface so glossy you could see your reflection. French polish protected wood from spills, heat marks, and everyday scratches. When it eventually dulled, you simply added more layers on top. The finish was endlessly renewable. It cost about 2 shillings for the shellac and methylated spirits. Modern polyurethane varnishes are tougher but cannot be repaired. Once they scratch, the whole surface must be stripped and refinished. French polish could be touched up in minutes. That is why antique furniture still glows after a century, and modern furniture looks tired after a decade. Number 3. The hot spoon for water rings. When someone left a wet glass on the good table and it left a white ring in the finish, your grandmother heated a tablespoon over the gas flame, wrapped it in a thin cloth, and pressed it gently onto the stain. The warmth drew the trapped moisture out of the finish, and the white mark faded to nothing in seconds. She had to be careful. Too hot and the spoon could scorch the surface. But done properly, the ring vanished completely and the original polish remained undamaged. White water rings are caused by moisture trapped within the surface finish, not damage to the wood itself. Heat evaporated that moisture back out. Every other method, from mayonnaise to toothpaste, risks scratching or staining. The warm spoon method was clean, fast, and left no residue. Your grandmother fixed water rings between clearing the main course and serving pudding. Nobody ever knew. Number 2. Egg white for patent leather. Patent leather shoes required a specific kind of care, and your mum had the perfect solution. She would separate an egg, beat the white lightly with a fork, and apply it to the patent leather with a soft cloth in thin, even strokes. As the egg white dried, it formed a clear, glossy film that restored the mirror-like shine and filled tiny surface cracks that made old patent leather look dull. The protein in the egg white contracted as it dried, pulling the surface taut and smooth. The shine lasted through a full evening of dancing, and the egg white peeled away cleanly when the shoes were next wiped down. Patent leather cleaners cost £10 today and contain petroleum-based polymers. Your mum's egg white produced a better shine and cost nothing. And number 1. Rags, not dusters, and always with the grain. The single most important trick your grandmother knew about making everything last was also the simplest. She never dusted with a feather duster. She used soft cotton rags cut from old vests and worn-out sheets, always slightly damp, and she always wiped with the grain of the wood, never across it. A feather duster just moves dust around and scratches polished surfaces with the sharp tips of the quills. A damp cotton rag picks up every particle and carries it away without scratching. Wiping with the grain meant the rag followed the natural channels in the wood, cleaning deep into the texture instead of dragging grit across it. That simple discipline, repeated every day for decades, is why her furniture never developed that dull, scratched grey look that plagues modern homes. She understood something fundamental. Looking after things is not a single dramatic act. It is a daily habit, a soft rag, a gentle hand, and the patience to do it properly. Everything she owned lasted a lifetime because she treated it as though it should. Here is my challenge to you. Pick one trick from this list and try it this week. Rub a walnut on that scratch in the table. Stuff newspaper in your shoes tonight. Make a jar of beeswax polish on Sunday afternoon. Then come back and tell me what happened. Tell me if these old tricks were just sentimental nonsense or if your grandmother actually knew something we threw away. I tried the walnut on my dining table and spent 10 minutes staring at where the scratch used to be. Share which trick you are going to try in the comments. These were not just household habits, they were wisdom that entire industries spent millions making us forget.